Well, welcome to Business Power Hour. This is normally Business Power Hour with Faith Mariah. I am not Faith Mariah, clearly. My name is Kelsey, and I am part of Team Faith Mariah. If you've ever emailed us, you have probably chatted with me. And I have some very special guests here today to talk with us about the morally gray areas in online business and kind of what their specialty has to say about it. So if you both want to introduce yourselves, let everybody know kind of who you are and what you do and what you're bringing to the conversation today.
After you.
Oh, sure. My name is Alyssa Hall. I am a business coach and an anti-racism consultant. I work with mainly coaches as well as like startup size businesses, just helping them not just have a successful business, but to do good business. And I think it's kind of hard to figure, okay, what does that mean without stripping myself and stripping my financial stability and all of that? And how do I not follow the rules of capitalism and the patriarchy in order to be successful? So that's the work that I do in the world.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
I love that. I'm Liz Stapleton, and I started blogging back in 2014. After I got done with law school and a ton of student loan debt, I started in the personal finance space for blogging. And then I kept seeing a lot of people just not understanding the legal side of blogging, and, passions collided. And so around, I think 2016 is when I started educating bloggers on the legal side of things, because while it's super important, I firmly believe it doesn't need to be scary or hard. I see a lot of scaremongering in this space. Not so much these days. There's a lot of really good legal people helping bloggers out these days. But back then it was like scaremongering. And I'm like, no. So that is kind of my aim with ElizabethStapleton.com. I also am the host of the Blogger Breakthrough Summit, which Faith has kindly been part of a couple times. And so that's where I help bloggers just streamline and just be more efficient with their time.
I love that. And thank you for being here. It's so exciting to have you both to bring like your unique perspectives to this subject. Since I have both of you, what I'd like to kind of go ahead and do is bring together your expertise to talk about like legal implications of handling things like bias and discrimination and that sort of thing, and like what that looks like in online business, in coaching, in, building out your website and your offers and all that kind of stuff, things like what like legal and ethical considerations there are along the way for when you're trying to implement things like diversity and inclusion in how you hire and who you work with and in how you speak to them.
Yeah. Liz, would you like to go ahead and I can piggyback off of you? I only ask you first since you have like the legalese. And
but I try not to speak in legalese because that's not helpful for people. I will say before I dive into like answering questions, this isn't legal advice. I'm not your lawyer. I don't know the specifics of the situation. So just quick disclaimer there. So obviously, laws around the world vary, right? There's a lot of international laws. And in the US with the Constitution, we have protected classes such as, not discriminating based on race, based on gender, things like that. That is ideal. The reality of the world we live in is a little bit, we're trying. Most of us are, I'd say. And with actually a lot of data privacy laws, there's also been some areas where they're like, you can't, just because certain states or countries have granted these rights about their data, you can't treat these people differently. So that's coming into play a lot more these days as well, because when GDPR came out back in 2018, people were like, oh, I'll just block my EU traffic. And like, you can't really do that with a lot of things now. So similar vein, very different impact. But, I always aim to, in my business and in sort of when I'm putting myself out there, people aren't surprised by kind of my stance on things. I include within like my emails and on my site, like social justice statements and basically I'm not going to tell anyone what to do, but I encourage them to, vote in your local elections and take part. It's important. In the online business, I think it's probably a little bit easier to, you don't necessarily sue who's buying from you, or you don't necessarily, so you don't know what they look like. You don't know what they identify gender wise. So in that regard, you're maybe not proactively being non-inclusive, I guess, but there are certainly steps you could take, which I'm sure you can share about actually being proactively inclusive.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I asked you to go first, because I feel like that's like a really good foundation to have this conversation on, of just like, let's be clear about what is even okay, what is actually legal, and what is just not. And then like jumping from that, like understanding too how our internal biases then affect the decisions that we're making, right? So if we're thinking about the piece that Liz brought up of like treating people differently or like actively discriminating and all of that, as you mentioned, a lot of us are really already just in life trying to not do that, and we are really active in that sense. And then the step further in that is also, okay, how is it that these thoughts that I already have, or just this belief that I have about something, how is it affecting the type of clients that I'm thinking are good clients? How is it affecting the way that I'm talking about my program? How does it affect a lot of these things? How is it even affecting how I'm showing up on sales calls, right? Like, I have a very quick example, but I remember speaking to a coach one time, and they were talking about how they had a sales call. Their work was I think like something science related, like sleep coaching. I don't remember. Point is, they got on a consult with a potential client, and the client was just telling them their problem, blah blah blah, and they said the word ain't, like I ain't something something something, and it distracted the coach so much that they were just like, oh my gosh, I'm getting all these people that aren't smart enough or aren't like, y'all know. And I'm just like, that that is number one, affecting your dollars, but also you're not realizing how that's going to affect the people that you could potentially bring into your program. But you've told yourself that if a person is using AAVE, African American Vernacular English, that they're not educated, when in reality they may just be comfortable talking to you, so they're not code switching in front of you. But those are just some of the things that come out with the question that you asked.
Wonderful. Yes. And something that kind of came up as you both were talking that I think is a very big talking point in the online space. And it's something that I've seen some discussion around, but never actually having this particular group of experts to be able to talk about it. Let's talk about payment plans. Can we talk about payment plans? I know a lot of people use them to help make their stuff more accessible. Sometimes they are done well, sometimes they're not. Sometimes I'm sure they are done in ways that are not entirely legal. So, would we like to address that?
Go ahead.
Because I feel like whatever you're going to say is going to be like the biggest slam dunk on what is just about to come out of my mouth. And it's mainly because I have thoughts about just ethics wise about it. But I think it's also just super important for people to even understand legally what we're allowed to do compared to what the norm is. And I say that because it's just so normal, especially in the coaching industry, for it to be like an added 20% on top of a payment plan. And it's just like, well, because the person is risky, or because of added fees, which I still don't understand what the added fees are. But all of these different things that make it so that this is what our norm in the industry is. And it's hard to then say, or to even just like understand all the layers of beliefs and thoughts that have us making decisions from this place. So I go on and on about payment plans because I feel like the sidebar about it is that there's just this fear underneath it. That's really what the core of all of this is, of just like, if I don't have a payment plan in this particular way, then I'm not going to be able to pay rent. And it's like, we don't have to go from 0 to 100 at all. But since this is just the norm and how we talk about things, that's what's causing us to make these decisions. So this is just from like the ethical side, but I'm so excited, Liz, to hear what you have to say.
I mean, so it's your business. You can kind of sell to a certain extent how you like. You need to make sure you have the proper terms and conditions in place that spell out, if you don't complete the payment plan, you lose access, things like that. I too have seen where it's like a huge cost difference between a payment plan and a pay in full. And to a certain extent, I understand it. If you're doing it to, kind of encourage the pay in full, that's one thing. If you're doing it because you don't think people are going to complete the payment plan, that's a completely another. So yes, there are additional fees, but they're not that much, right? So there's like the additional 30 cents and percentage of the Stripe fee for each payment, right? Yes. So like when I do payment plans, there's a couple bucks difference because I was like, there's some additional cost. It's not a lot. Oh my gosh, my cat. I'm so sorry. I kicked the dogs out, but the cat stayed. So I don't like making a huge difference in those. I have it, but the way I've set my business up is if you're not completing your payment plan, you're no longer getting access to the product. And so I have no problem with that, with setting it up that way and making the payment plan similar and affordable. And especially because I come from the personal finance space as a blogger, so I'm always striving to make things super affordable and accessible because everyone's financial situation is very different. And you just don't know. One of the other things I've seen more and more lately is, especially with like Thrivecart and like all the new payment options out there where they can do like Klarna and pay later and stuff, is they don't actually offer a payment plan, but they say, hey, starting at this because it's through Klarna, but they have to qualify for that.
Yeah.
And so, and like, there's so much like economic disparity in terms of, just being, some people, their parents set them up with a credit card in their name when they're 16 so they can build a credit score, and others aren't that fortunate, So I see that as being somewhat discriminatory in a sense because you're not being aware of, hey, they might be able to fully afford that payment plan, but because of like how, what sort of benefits they had growing up and what sort of privilege they've experienced, they may not be able to use that tool. And those tools are also, it's not like a monthly payment plan. Sometimes it's like every 2 weeks or it's, and so I don't really see that as actually offering a payment plan for accessibility. Like I wouldn't position it that way. It kind of annoys me a little bit when people do that. It's not illegal or anything. I just think it's a little shady. And it's a little just not being cognizant of what a payment plan can do for people. Because I have, like in the past, I've purchased things with payment plans because like, I don't have the upfront investment right now, but I can totally do that. And I can absolutely afford that every month, and I love it when I see that it's not a huge disparity, right? Because it was more like a, hey, my savings took a hit, I can't do that, but so just being cognizant of the financial privilege that exists in a wide array of backgrounds and where people might fall, and it doesn't mean they aren't capable of the payment plan or whatever. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. Is just, if you're banking on the extra 20% because you don't think they're going to compete the payment plan, like figure some other way to figure that out. Like just drip the course so they only get access to certain things,
Yeah. It's so funny. You keep going. I'm like, I'm going to say, we're going to talk about, nope, she's got it. She's already got it. Because I think, a good point that I saw someone else make too, is that if there's that many people defaulting on your program, you have to wonder, is it a client problem or a messaging problem, or is there something that needs to be observed in your program? Why is there such a high number of defaults, and what needs to be done to ensure this, right? And I mean, I think there's a lot of things that can be put into place in your program to make sure it's valuable, make sure people are getting the support and the education that they need to want to continue. But also, like you said, doing things where, if you are concerned, if maybe it is a rare occasion that somebody defaults, but maybe you do have, okay, well, the payment plan will be dripped courses. And like after this many payments, you get this much, or after that payment, you get that, that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of ways to go around it. And I'm really glad that you brought up the third-party processors too, because that was something as soon as we got on this topic, I'm like, how do we feel about that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not opposed, but I wouldn't have a payment plan and then have them use that too, if that's,
right.
But I'm a big proponent of payment plans. I did a training a couple years ago where it was I earned 50% more revenue from a summit because I offered a payment plan on the All Access Pass.
That's amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Had I not done that,
mm-hmm.
that's a ton of revenue.
Yeah.
It's because people especially money's tight these days. It's hard to pull up, that, but a payment plan that's affordable,
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's incredible. And thinking about these financial aspects that do have legal implications, they do have ethical implications. I think it's really important to see kind of, okay, there's a lot of, like you said, Alyssa, a lot of industry standards that are maybe things that need to be otherwise observed, otherwise questioned and repositioned, for lack of better words.
Yeah. And you saying that, there's this meme that makes its rounds every 6 months or so. And every time I see it, it makes me want to pull my hair out. Because I feel like I'm the only one on the other side, screaming at the meme. But it's $50,000 client says, okay, invoice sent.
I know exactly what you're. Oh my gosh, that one drives me crazy. Oh, I cannot.
Yes,
I cannot.
Yes.
Do you want to go ahead and finish for those who have not seen it? But I know exactly what you're saying, and it does it. Oh, gets under my skin.
Yes. And the second half is $500 client, and they're asking a bunch of quote unquote annoying questions. And every time I see it, everyone's like, yes, oh my God, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just this is a marketing problem. This is not a client problem, because oftentimes when we do a lower cost, whatever it is, it's oh yeah, just buy this little course that's going to solve every one of your problems. And it's that's a y'all problem. Then you should be marketing your $50,000 thing just as well as the $500 one. But we put more effort into marketing the $50,000 one. So then when that client comes in, they're the perfect ideal client in comparison to the low ticket thing that's trying to just grab every single Joe Schmo. And then you're annoyed that all the Joe Schmoes don't like this random thing that's supposed to solve all their problems, or are made for a specific client, but because it's low ticket, you're thinking more about numbers. And so it's just one of the things I talk about a lot is what is the actual problem here compared to what we're being told the problem is in the business norms.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, to that point also, I feel like that has to have been put out by somebody who is in the super high ticket space, for the simple fact that at some point there does seem to be almost a shift to where people are encouraged to invest without asking questions, right? People are encouraged, just trust me. Working with me is going to solve your problems. Just trust me. You shouldn't have any questions. Just, and I think that is kind of also the basis of that too, where it's what are people being told that they should consume, that they should pay for, that kind of thing, and just not have any questions about.
Yes. And it's oh, and if you do have questions, then you're a problem. And even when we think about I remember, I haven't heard this rhetoric that much anymore, but it's something I've thought about more recently. When people used to complain about clients who were coach shopping, and they'd be on a consult with you, and then they'd be okay, well, I have a consult with someone else, so I'll let you know. And I'm just that's just an informed decision. They're making an informed decision on who do I feel can best solve my problem, especially with coaching. I'm spending an hour a week maybe really talking to you about your deep stuff. Yeah, make sure that I'm the right person for you to feel comfortable to do that with. But
Right.
it's like, oh, well, they didn't just sign their life away in 3 seconds.
Hmm.
Then they're an annoying client or a bad potential client or what have you.
Yeah. No, I fully agree with that. And it's almost like if a realtor came to you and was like, "Oh, you want to buy a house? Well, here's the house you're going to buy. It's at the top of your budget. Just trust me, it's the house for you. It's fine. You
Yeah.
don't need to ask any questions. You don't need to take a tour. You don't need to go make sure it's got electricity. It's fine. This is the house I picked for you."
Yeah, and don't look at any other houses either. Like this is just the one.
Definitely. No, this is definitely the one. Welcome back, Liz. Are you here?
I am. I'm so sorry. My mic.
Oh, that's okay.
The audio, I couldn't hear you. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. I was like, oh, we lost her. It's fine. We had a lovely talk about coaches who don't think that you should ask any questions before investing with them.
Raise your hand if you invested with a coach and it was a waste of money.
For those of you listening on the replay podcast, it was all three of us. We have all three. What is it? Raise your hand if you've been a victim of the Mean Girls. Yes. Yes. Raise your hand if you've been Regina Georged by a coach.
Yeah.
So that to say, when it comes to something like coaching or making those big investments, what are some of the things, Liz, do you feel like that coaches need to legally cover to ensure that people are being protected on both sides of the transaction when they're, especially as you get into like high ticket or anything like that?
Yeah, I think especially if you're doing like a one-on-one coaching as opposed to group coaching, which I think is a little bit different. Group coaching, you're probably going to be more using like terms and conditions, but I think one-on-one coaching, you should have a contract, right? The expectations of each party, spelling out like what they're going to do. And also like, hey, I can coach you, as much as you want, but if you don't take action, right? Like I can't, there's only so much coaching can do. So a contract, especially for one-on-one, I think is rather than just like the checkout with the terms, because then both sides are making a commitment to that relationship in terms of expectation. Like you're not going to be, expecting something from the coach that the coach isn't planning to do because it wasn't put in the contract. Like, exactly what you're getting that way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I just had a good one and it went away. I was just going to add to that with I think a lot of coaches, there's not a lot of coaches, but coaches that are in a particular mindset forget that coaching is a tool and a service. And, I am a service provider for online businesses and I have a contract, right? I have a contract that says, here is when you can get a hold of me. Here is how you can get a hold of me. Here is what I'm going to deliver to you. And here is how timely it's going to happen, right? And so I think when people forget, like, coaching is not just, oh, you're going to pay me money so that we can chit chat. Like we're going to actually, like, I'm providing a service of, helping you with this coaching tool that we use. And, we're going to work together so that you can get this result, but again, that contract, like you said, spells out both sides of that for people.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else on that sort of thing? Payment plans. I feel like we covered payment plans pretty in depth. We had lots of feelings about that, as I do as well.
I think the main thing to just like for anyone who's listening and has had that internal struggle is just see, is there any all or nothing thinking coming up? Like that's really what the core of a lot of it is. It's just fear running on the all or nothing thinking that causes us to feel like, okay, either I have a payment plan that is equitable, or I have one that has this upcharge, or I don't have payment plans at all. And that's the only way I'm going to be stable is if I do the other one. And it's just like, there's a myriad of options and ways to keep yourself safe and stable. And the big one is boundaries. Like Liz brought up an example of a boundary that can be put in. And I know a lot of times we have resistance to like putting on our grown-up pants and having to do that. And I say that with love because I have a hard time.
I know we all enjoy our
Mhm.
business, but it is a business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think too, like when you get into those situations where you do have to like pause and set a boundary, reiterate a boundary, that sort of thing, like take a step back and like let yourself regulate a little bit. You know, you can draft an email or a message and then, you know, step away from it and go redraft it, right? Make it. I have had to do that many of times. And I do think that it's very helpful in these situations where you're having to enforce boundaries, remind people of their contract terms, you know, deal with something that is a little uncomfortable because those kinds of things are going to come up in our businesses. Something that I wanted to kind of come back to just a little bit on the payment plans and like the third party payment plan, air quotes, processors is, you know, using that versus having your own payment plan and just like if somebody does on the very rare occasion default their payment plan and you just cut off access, it also prevents doing some kind of harm to that other person. Whereas when you go through these third party services, like they're going to collections if they default on that. And it's, you know, it can cause people harm. And I think that's kind of something else to look into when you're considering those options.
Yeah.
Kind of going back to that credit thing that, you know.
Yeah, and I think it's I've had one like instance in my business where a client was like, "Listen, I am so sorry, I cannot pay this month, and I value your work and blah blah," and like just very just deeply,
right,
you know,
yeah,
and it ended up working out because I had the payment plan start a month before. It was a group coaching program, so it's like the payment plan started the month before. So I was like, "Hey, listen, you're good. We're just gonna move, pretend that was this month, and then you're just gonna pay an extra month, whatever." I say all that to say is that you can have conversations with a human being compared to Klarna doesn't want to hear none of that.
No.
They don't care. And if you go past whatever date, then that's it. It's on your credit report. And if you've already been struggling, even in the slightest sense, now that thing is going to be exponential compared to this could have been a conversation. Let's pause your services for a month, regroup, whatever.
Yeah. It becomes the like worse your credit score is, the more expensive everything is. It's terrible, but that is the fact, right? If you have a lower credit score, you're paying higher interest. You know, and it's just the way it goes. It's the way our financial system's set up. And so it's a really big, you know, it like you said, if you're already like, it just makes it so much worse. I actually just had my sister, like she has automatic payment on her credit card. And for some reason, the credit card company screwed up and pulled from a bank account that she hasn't had in like 10 years. And so it didn't go through. And they legit just closed her card.
Oh my goodness.
Exactly.
And now she's having to go through the process. And so like another one of her cards decreased her limit. She's having to go through the process of correcting her credit report. Like it's a whole nightmare. And it wasn't even her fault.
Yeah. I went through something so similar and I forgot about it until I
was respect you. I really am. But
it's terrible because they're just like, well, sorry, the process is already done. You can't do anything. This is on your credit report forever. And it's just like, are you hello?
Yeah, like it's a pain. You have to take action to get that fixed. It's a whole thing. But I think knowing the ins and outs of whatever payment processing system you're using, right? Because sometimes their card just expired and they totally forgot. And that's way easier to deal with than if they're doing like Klarna, right? Like that's way easier. You can go and be like, if you need to know, hey, here's how you can go update your card. Right. This is all, and they're like, oh my gosh, 9 times out, they're like, oh my God, I just didn't realize. Because who pays attention to their credit card expiration dates? I don't. Unless you email me being like, this card's expired. Like, I don't remember to go update it.
Yeah. Well, and, go ahead.
No, I was just like, you know, being able to do that and being able to, like I said, have the conversations, be a human. And doing that. And like, especially like my my, checkout, I can pause a subscription if need be, right? Like things like that.
Yeah. Well, even, like you said, technical glitches. For instance, like I was paying for a monthly service, my card expired, right? So it's somebody local. So she sent me a text message. She's like, hey, like your payment declined. Like you guys never decline a payment. Like it's probably your card. I'm like, oh, shoot, like it is. So I updated it. But for like 3 months, we were having this issue because it wasn't saving the card. And so every single month for like 3, I'm like, I promise we have money. I was like, can you just like delete it and make a new payment plan? Because this is not working. But those types of things, again, like if it was some big company or something or some third-party processor, they'd be like, yeah, okay, your card's expired and it didn't save. I'm so sure. Yes. So I love, go ahead. Did you have something to add?
Oh, no, I'm just like, yes, this is all, yeah.
Yes. I would love to shift gears because I know we've kind of talked about like where your guys' stuff overlaps. Would either of you like to talk about specific to your niche, what kinds of morally gray areas we see, some things to look out for, some precautions to add to your business, that sort of thing? Who wants to go first?
I think she should go first. I feel like, because mine, it's like how comfortable you are with risk, but I feel like yours is a little more like really gray.
Yeah, it's really weird and kind of hard, honestly, because there are a lot of things just in not just business norm, but then online business norm and then coaching norm. And I feel like the deeper that we get, the more things feel super rigid in terms of like, oh, this is just how it is. But also taking a step back and saying like, oh, this is a little weird. This is a lot of weird, actually. And I always default to the payment plan situation because I'm just like, we are still yelling and screaming and having back and forths about these things after all these years. But also, I just think it boils down to kind of what I had touched on before of just like, what are we saying or what are we believing about what makes a good client or what makes someone just a good client. Like I've heard so many different times of just, oh, I'm going to raise my prices so that I can get more qualified leads. And I'm like, that I wish people on the podcast could see your face because your face is exactly
it's like that TikTok sound that goes, brother, ew.
And it's like, if we there's so many core things that we need to understand, like, what am I actually saying by saying this? I am actually saying that someone who has less access to capital is not going to take this seriously. And every time I think about that, I'm just like, y'all know, like college scholarships, free rides exist. Right. And they graduate and they do their thing and whatever. It has nothing to do with how much a person has paid for a thing to make it serious or not. It's more so how much they value the result or value the thing. And that is, again, boiling down to like, what's the actual problem here? The actual problem here is marketing. And instead of solving that problem, we're going to do things like raising prices, removing accessibility things, removing things that will make things equitable so that we don't have to look at the actual problem, which is marketing.
It's almost like in that instance, it kind of makes me think that you don't want to put someone, it's a belief in yourself too, of you're like, well, if they don't have a whole lot of access to capital and they're investing in me and I can't provide that result. Right?
Ooh, that's big.
Whereas if I have someone that can like to throw this money, like doesn't ask questions, I'm not as worried about the result they're going to get because I know they'll be.
Oh, that was good. I've never even thought about it from that
perspective.
But you're right. There is
Yeah.
a little bit of that in there of just like, now I
I'm on the
really
hook.
have to deliver. And
Yeah.
how secure am I in myself to be able to do that?
And what my offer does. Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh. Ooh.
That was good.
There is like as much like I'm not a super woo person, but there's so much mindset that goes into your success. You have to believe in your offers in order to properly market them, to get the people you want, to get them to make sure they get the results they need. Like it all ties together.
Yeah.
Right. And if we were so like strong in our belief of everything that we bring, then we wouldn't be so deeply afraid of a lot of these things. Like even I have seen like sketchy refund things in regards to programs. And I understand like if you've provided the service, then things are a little bit different, but it's like I have heard stories of people entering week 1 of the program saying this is not for me, and it was a painful only program, saying this is not for me, and then the coach refused to give them their money back. And it's just like, because it wasn't what you had advertised, number one. Number two, in regards to accepting me into the program, you know what's in the program better than I do. So you shouldn't have said yes to me to begin with. It's just, it's a lot of just stuff. But again, if you were really doing that work of, am I secure in this? Does this actually do what I want it to do? A lot of those other problems that we're so fearful of, that are so normal in regular business because they don't care, they have volume, we wouldn't have to keep copying those practices here.
Yeah.
And that's the whole other thing, is the application process. You've got to be really cognizant of the questions you're asking to ensure.
Let's talk about that.
You know, you're not diving into those areas, right? You need to ask the questions that you need to ask to make sure they're the right fit, but you need to make sure you're not discriminating. Like that can be a real fine line to walk. If you are running some sort of program, group coaching or otherwise that has an application process, you need to be careful about the things you're asking because you will interpret them, right? And how you, based on your experience and what your sort of, you know, as you've spoken, what your default is that you don't even realize is your default.
Yeah. That is really good. Do you have or want to share some examples of things to stay away from or to like be a little careful about?
I mean, so like obviously you can't ask things like, what's your rate? I mean, you could, I guess, but you can't. I almost wouldn't, because you don't, if you've got that like internal, you know, compass that is crooked, you know, which you don't realize. I mean, but there's studies, right, of like someone, if they just didn't put their first name on a resume, or if they changed the name on a resume to be more of a specific, you know, race or whatever, and like the resume passing the first round versus not, even though they're identical. Like there's, you have to really be deep and cognizant of what am I interpreting when I see something, when I see a name, when I see a location, when I see, you know, if you have like an address and you're familiar with that zip code and you're like, well, that place isn't the night, you know, like there's like I said, these are gray areas, right? You need to just be really cognizant. You have to be very proactive. So if you're going to have an application, like you need to ask more, I think, about like, what are they looking to achieve, rather than where are you located? What's your name? What's your gender? What's your rate? Whatever.
Right.
You know, what are you looking to achieve? What have you done so far? What is your biggest fear? Like those are great questions to ask if they're going to be right for your program.
Sure.
Can I? Oh, go ahead.
Like they'll need an email address, but do you really need to know their address? Like when they check out, sure, because maybe you want to send a gift. Like if you want to go that route, but in the application process, no.
Yeah. And really in that case, most of the time, like unless you're sending a physical gift, just knowing their time zone is probably fine.
Yeah. If it's calls, asking time, though, that's probably a good call. That's fantastic.
What were you going to add, Alyssa?
No, I'm like, you're mentioning something that just didn't even hit me until right now, of the understanding how your biases may have you interpret something on an application. And I think another question that makes sense, I guess, for like for business coaches to ask, like, how much have you made this year, last year, what have you, to make sure that they're in whatever place that you can work with people.
Mhm.
But I also wonder, like, how that can affect the way that you are looking at the application, right? If they make a certain amount and it's a high amount, are you more willing to accept them and not do the cognitive thinking of, are they actually a good applicant? Will that
Yeah.
come up for you? Or even if they make too low, are you then looking at that of just like, oh, I want to help them, I want to save them, and again, still not looking at the application of
And
like,
it could be the person
Yes.
who made a ton, their profit
yeah,
was like 1%. And the person
Yeah.
that didn't make much had like a 90% profit.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how much did you
Mhm.
pay yourself might be a better question.
Yeah,
That's really true.
yeah.
Oh, so many good points. I love that. Thank you guys so much. I know that you guys both submitted some freebies, some things for our guests to get more familiar with you and your work. Do you want to share a little bit about that, or if you have something else that you want to share that you haven't already submitted? Please feel free if you want to share about that, where people can learn more about you and the work you do and how to work with you and get to know your stuff.
Do you want to go first?
Oh, sure. Doesn't matter. Yeah, the freebie that I have is an audio course called Become the Patriarchy's Worst Nightmare. And I love the little title. When I came up with that title, I was like, oh, that was good. I did that. But it really just walks through all of the different ways that the patriarchy and capitalism have, I don't want to say infiltrated, but that's the only word that's coming to my mind, but how it is such a core mainstay in business. So there's like an episode on power, an episode on fear, like all of these different things that attach to our mindset and how it shows up for us, as well as just a couple of tips here and there to try to know when that's showing up for you, as well as to hopefully do something different.
Yeah. And I just have to add, I think you had another audio course previous to that I got from you and really, really love. So Alyssa's audio courses, they're not just like, like a couple minutes of something or other, right? Like her stuff is really good. So definitely go check out the audio course. We're going to have all the links in the show notes of the podcast and the blog post for this episode. So definitely go and grab that, go follow her, get to know her work and her stuff. Thank you. Awesome. What about you, Liz?
So I don't know that I submitted something specific just because my life's been really, really crazy the last couple weeks.
That's okay.
But when your dad just decides to have open heart surgery, like crazy when I tell you. But if you just go to elizabethstapleton.com/resources, I've got all sorts of goodies there. I've got a free workshop, checklist, ebooks, all sorts of good stuff. So you can just go to elizabethstapleton.com/resources and you'll find all that there.
Awesome. And we will, again, make sure to put that in the show notes and share all of that. Any final thoughts for anybody doing this kind of work, for wanting to really just make sure that they're operating according to their values, operating according to legal terms, like all that kind of stuff? Any like final closing, here's my last thoughts, anything like that?
Well, I loved what one of you guys mentioned earlier, is take a step back. When someone says something to you or is upset about something in your business, you can draft something, but don't send it. Take a step.
Yeah.
Right? Because it could be, they're really stressed about money and they thought they canceled the subscription and they forgot. So double check. Did you receive something? Did something not go through? Do your due diligence, be the grown up. I'm not saying our customers are like the toddlers, but in that instance, they're not necessarily thinking rationally sometimes, or they're coming more from an emotional place. And so you need to step back and not match that emotion. You need to come from a more rational, let me think through this. Did this get covered? What is the actual underlying issue here? And is that, aligning with my,
beliefs and biases and things like that. Did I make a mistake? Because sometimes you do. And own up to that. Like, take responsibility if you make a mistake. It's okay. But take a step back. Be rational. Respond to emotion with as much compassion and ration as you can.
It's a very, very lawyer answer. Like, let's be rational. Let's think it through. I love it. I mean, it's a good answer for everyone, of course, but it's, like, of course, that sounds very fitting. How about you, Alyssa?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is to just kind of hopping onto that. Whenever you hear any type of business advice, business norm, whatever you think you should be quote unquote doing, just pause and check in with you, right? It may be someone who you really, really like, and someone who you really admire, and they're like, this is the way to XYZ. If that doesn't resonate with you, that may just be their way, right?
Yeah.
And it's not going to work for you if you are sitting here trying to contort yourself into something that doesn't feel good, and allow yourself to say it doesn't feel good. Because I hear a lot of people saying like, oh, this method or this thing that my coach said, it doesn't feel right. But that's just me just being afraid of success. I'm just like, that could be there, but also it could just be your internal compass. And let's just allow yourself to just believe you, and then find a different way to achieve the same result. I think I have an episode on the podcast of like only one right way. Like, that is a core tenet of white supremacy culture and the patriarchy, of just belief in only one right way. There are a ton of ways to do things. So allow yourself to say, this doesn't really feel good. Let me find something else.
I love it. I love it. Thank you both for being here, for sharing your expertise. We really appreciate you guys coming on and just, letting people know that there are other ways, that there are better ways, and it doesn't always have to look the same for every business, but, there are ways to do this comfortably and to make sure that everybody gets what they came for, whether to your programs or your coaching or just your business in general, making sure that people are getting served and that your expertise is being shared. So thank you for everybody who is watching. I cannot see on the stream who was watching or commenting, but we will also be posting the replay on the podcast, on the blog in the next week or so, and we will see you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.